Hi, I'm Greg Brown, and you're watching Dingo Talk.
You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know by now. You wanna know. You wanna know.
Chuckleheads, I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest this week is voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Greg Brown. Greg, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Carlo, it's my pleasure. There's nothing like being on Dingo Talk. I've said that for years.
Well, I appreciate that. At least I got somebody out there rooting for me. So you grew up in, you were born in the DC area, but you grew up kind of in central PA. How does that all unfold?
How much time you got, Carlo?
we got an hour.
It's a long story. I'll try and give you a truncated version as best as I can, and not to bore you with too many details. But my father was from Connellsville, PA. My mother from Greensburg, Pennsylvania. My grandfather, my mom's father, was a congressman in Western Pennsylvania for a number of years. So he raised his family basically in Washington, D.C. as a U.S. congressman. My mother and father married shortly after my mother and her family had moved to D.C. So they started raising their kids in Washington, D.C. They started out with 6 boys, and then they had their lone girl of the family. I'm the 6th of 7 kids. And by the time I had gotten to 3rd grade, things were not too good in the DC area. Politically speaking, the atmosphere was not good. It's probably actually similar to frankly, the way things are going now these days in major cities around the country. And my father did not want to raise any more kids. He already had a couple of them. My older brothers were, one was headed to college, I think. 2 of them were in high school, and he thought it'd be a good idea to get them out of there. He was in the coal business. He was actually a lobbyist for the coal industry, and basically got a job in Harrisburg, PA, when I was in the 3rd grade, and that's when the family moved to what turned out to be initially Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, right across the Susquehanna River from Harrisburg, and then on to Mechanicsburg, not too far away from Camp Hill on the West Shore, and went through my rest of my grade school and high school years there in the Harrisburg area.
So your roots do tie you into this area of Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Greensburg, Connellsville. I'm guessing the fan base your brothers and whatnot had favorite teams. Was there a specific team that you liked growing up? Were you a Baltimore fan? Were you a Washington fan? Or were you kind of just, that wasn't until you got older and then you were already in PA, so you became a Pirates or a Phillies fan?
Yeah, my brothers were all huge Redskin fans. Well, now the Washington football team, but at the time, the Redskins, huge Redskin fans. And the old Washington Senators, a team that moved in the, I think, early 70s to Texas, and only recently speaking, as I think the last dozen years, got a team back from Montreal. So they were all football, baseball fans. And I really did, shortly after the move to the Harrisburg area is when I started to get into sports. And for some crazy reason, my first real love was the Chicago Bears. And that was simply because my brother, again, youngest of, I was a puny little kid. My brothers beat me up like crazy and used to play knee football, we called it, in the living room. I don't know if you've heard of that, Carlo, but basically you play football on a carpet on your knees.
Yep.
With a little football, and you throw it to yourself. And anyway, and I just remember vividly being one day playing, getting beat up, and looking up. They happened to have the television set on to an NFL Films piece showing an old Chicago Bears running back. At the time, he was in his prime, named Gale Sayers. And I was mesmerized by the beauty of this slow motion film with the music in the background, and John Facenda, the great voice of NFL Films. Gale Sayers ran over the Green Bay Packers defensive line like a runaway Tonka toy. That's what I remember, that script, like, wow, it was so cool. And I got to really dive into Gale Sayers. And then there was a story about him rooming. He was I believe, the first black player in the NFL to room with a white player, another running back named Brian Piccolo. Later, that became a movie called Brian's Song. And I just fell in love with them. And then not too long thereafter, my father still had business in Pittsburgh, being in the coal industry, and he would have meetings. And I once broke my elbow falling off my bike, landing on it, and really bad, broke it bad. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks and in traction, and it was a mess. And I was miserable. A little kid, just hated it there. And my father promised, if I did things right, once I got out of there, he would take me to my first Major League Baseball game. And that's when he took me to Pittsburgh, and I saw my first Pirates game. And we actually stayed at the old Hilton Hotel at the Golden Triangle. And he would be off. In this day and age, this is unheard of. He would go to his meetings, somewhere in the city, and he paid off like one of the bellmen to just watch me. This little kid running around the lobby of the Hilton Hotel, this huge lobby. And I would run around all day long trying to get autographs of the visiting baseball teams. And that became an annual event for me, where I would gather all these autographs of all the great players I remember vividly the teams that we saw. My first team was the Giants. Next year was the New York Mets, then the Atlanta Braves, San Diego Padres. And as I got older, the older I got, the more serious I got about the baseball team. I grew up in central Pennsylvania. All my buddies were Phillies Orioles fan. It was kind of that territory. Phillies, Flyers, Sixers. And one of my buddies' parents loved the Phillies, and they would go to all these Philly games. And whenever they played the Pirates, I would tag along with them and go to Old Veterans Stadium. And again, my fandom just kind of grew, and lo and behold, I became a Pirate fanatic.
And here you are.
Yeah,
here you are now.
Yeah.
So, being from Central PA, first, did you participated in high school athletics? Is that how you got in, or was broadcasting kind of a thing that you always kind of knew that you were going to go towards?
Like I think most kids that get involved in sports, I was in intramural. I wasn't good enough to be. I was kind of lazy, I think. I played. We didn't even. Our high school. I tell whenever I go back to the Harrisburg area where my high school is, I tell my buddies how crazy it is that when we were growing up, our high school didn't even have a baseball team. Now they do. Now they're pretty good. So I played Legion ball. Baseball was my first love, but I played the intramural sports, basketball and football, and loved all sports. And, my dream was this, man, maybe make it to play college ball and college baseball, maybe play professional baseball, but found out early on that I was just not a good enough athlete. And as time went on, I was one of those guys where I don't know if people still do this. Maybe I was unique in this regard, that when I played all these sports, my buddies to this day laugh about it, that they got an opportunity not only to play when I was involved on the field or on the court, but they got an announcer. I would play and announce the game. And because I just loved listening to announcers of the day and kind of impersonated them. And I just couldn't help myself. And so that's kind of how I fell in love with the idea of announcers. Now, I don't know that I really honestly thought that I could be an announcer someday, but I knew two things. I knew I loved sports, and in particular, I loved the Pirates. I guess three things: the Pirates, and because of that, the city of Pittsburgh. When my father took me the first time to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, taking the turnpike and then on to 376, the Parkway East, I can remember as a little kid kind of leaning my face up against the car window. And people often talk about the view going through the Fort Pitt tunnels and seeing the city open up. Bang, right there's the Golden Triangle. But my angle was different. My angle came in from the Boulevard of the Allies and the Parkway East. But still, to me, looking up at these, what I thought were gigantic skyscrapers, the city opened up to me in that regard. And then staying at the Hilton Hotel and staying up on one of the higher floors, and at night, and maybe after a game, or maybe we arrived in Pittsburgh the night before a game, and the lights of the stadium, Three Rivers Stadium, were still on. And Pittsburgh was my Oz. And the yellow brick road was the turnpike and the Parkway East and the Boulevard of the Allies. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. So I would try and tune in. Back then, we didn't have internet. We didn't have the phone devices. You can get a major league game anywhere you want, anytime. You had to work for it back then. So for me, it was tuning in to KDK radio at night. During the daytime, there's a station in Huntington, Pennsylvania that carried afternoon baseball games. It came in even clearer for me, which is great. In winter months, I would still listen to KDKA when I could at night. I listened to WBBM in Chicago on Sunday nights when I could, to hear about a Bears wrap-up game. But so my tie became the radio. That was my umbilical cord to Pittsburgh. And I wanted anything to do with Pittsburgh and the Pirates. And when I got the Pirate job out of first year out of college, really, that's maybe when I thought about, when I got to know the announcers, wow, maybe this was a possibility.
Well, so I got two questions. One, when you were coming into Pittsburgh your first time, do you remember if the Parkway East still went to a standstill right before you went into the Squirrel Hill Tunnel? And then it opened up and there was nothing there.
Yeah. It was still under construction. Yeah, no doubt about that. It was down to one lane, took forever, but yeah.
So nothing changed. It's just
nothing absolutely nothing has changed. For what, almost 50, probably close to 50 years ago.
My second question is, so you brought up college. I'm guessing because Pittsburgh held that as Oz to you, is that how what drew you to Point Park? Was Point Park your first choice, or how did you end up getting to Point Park College?
First year out of high school, I was a terrible student. When I speak to colleges or high schools, I kiddingly ask the professor or the teacher to please leave the room. And I tell the kids, how bad I was as a student, but I was just not into it. I was into sports. That's all I cared about. I would wrap my textbooks with Sports Illustrated covers of the Bears and the Pirates whenever I could. I was really I guess, geek to a degree, and nerd. Nerd may be a better word, but so I was kind of a middling student at best. And when I got out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to a community college in Harrisburg to try and figure things out, and starting earning some general credits and liberal arts credits. And that's when an opportunity came up at the Pirates that landed me an internship in Pittsburgh. And my first time I got to Pittsburgh, I went to CCAC, got credits. I even visited Robert Morris College to think they had a baseball team and maybe I could get there. And I found out quickly that was silly. But Point Park, the real reason Point Park was because of how easy it was for me to go to do my job at the Pirates and then go to Point Park at night and get some college credits. Robert Morris back then, I don't know if it's still the case, you actually had to, the first, I think, couple of years live in Moon before you could go to the downtown campus. So that it just came down to, that was kind of the only thing left. And I didn't check out Duquesne. I probably was, I don't know why, but yeah, Point Park was my.
Well, so during this time when you're getting your college degree at night, you spent the first, there was 10 years there that you spent with the Pirates that internship brought you, correct?
Well, yeah, my internship lasted 1 year. The 79 season was my internship year.
What a year.
Then, yeah, I know. I thought that's not, so this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to be a good luck charm. It turned out it was the exact opposite. So yeah, and then after the internship ended after the World Series, I went back to Mechanicsburg. And shortly thereafter, I got a call from a team vice president that asked me if I wanted to be basically a clubhouse guy in Bradenton, Florida for the instructional league team. And again, I didn't want to leave the Pirates. I was very, basically fighting back tears when I had left after the World Series because I had my friends there, and that was Pittsburgh and the Pirates. And shortly thereafter, I got this phone call, and heck yeah, anything, I'll take it. And so I went down to Bradenton and worked probably the hardest job I've ever worked. I have such respect for clubhouse guys. I didn't have any help. I didn't know anything about being a clubhouse guy, but found out in a hurry that, and not just the Pirates instructional league team. I had the Pirates, the Yankees instructional league team, and a Japanese team. I had 3 teams, and it was from dusk till well past dawn, working 7 days a week, cleaning every uniform, jock straps, toilets, showers. It was really eye-opening. It was worthwhile for me because I think it showed the Pirates, again, my dedication. When that ended, there were no guarantees. I went back to Pittsburgh. In fact, the guy that hired me from the Pirates asked me to be the full-time clubhouse guy down in Bradenton at Pirate City. And I turned him down, and he wasn't real happy about it. I went back to Pittsburgh, and a couple of months later, the director of promotions from the Pirates, who had hired me as an intern to begin with, called me and said, we're looking to hire full-time. You interested? Of course I was, and went back.
So how do you find yourself at, because in 87, you end up being the PA announcer for a year, correct?
Yeah, 87. I think it was 87. Well, you may have the years right there, Carlo. 80. One of those years, either before or after, I did some pre and post game work on what is now AT&T Sportsnet. That's evolved over the years. Back then, it was a fledgling cable outlet that did 50 games a year. And it was KBL.
Okay.
And did pre and post. I was like the Robbie Inspikowski back then of KBL, the first guy. I did some of that stuff for a year, and then I think I did go PA for a full year after that. And that's when Art McKinnon, who had been the longtime public address announcer, kind of took me under his wing. He had been stricken with polio as a youngster. He was back at Forbes Field. He was well into his 80s when the Pirates kind of told him, hey, he struggled with the polio. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't do double headers. It really hurt him at night when it got late, rain delays. And I was working the scoreboard room at the time. And he asked me if I would help him. And so I did kind of the balls and strikes on the scoreboard at Three River Stadium. And then on occasion, he wanted to take a couple of innings off for a doubleheader. I would actually do public address announcing, and that evolved into the full-time job. And but I got my hands into a lot of things. That was one of them, the public address announcing.
So then from there, do you end up in Youngstown first, or do you make the jump straight to Buffalo?
So after I guess that was probably 87. I think you mentioned 87, the public address announcing. And I think
I have 88 here as a sports anchor for.
Okay, that would have been right. Yeah, okay, 88, yeah. 88 was the year before I went to Buffalo. So in 88, Bob Pompiani, who you probably know is a longtime anchor at KDK-TV. He also went to Point Park. I actually had the distinction of being classmates with both Bob and Bruce Pompiani. Bruce spent a lot of time as a news anchor in Pittsburgh. And but I took so many years at Point Park that I was able to actually spend time with both of those guys. But Bob called me one day, knowing my ultimate goal was to get into broadcasting. I was in the front office of the Pirates. They called me one day, and again, I'd done some work on KBL. I'd done the PA announcing. I did some voiceover work. I hosted a radio show called This Week in Pirates Baseball every Sunday. Did a lot of things, and Bob had known that for a long time. And he said, the job opened up for the NBC TV affiliate in Youngstown, their weekend sports anchor job. He goes, I think you should apply. And so I did, and with the help of a buddy of mine in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Carlo, I don't know if we'll ever get into this, but whenever I speak to any classes of broadcast classes or individuals, be the high school or college guys and gals that are interested in getting in the business, I tell them that they have to really want it badly. And so I can tell my story almost as an out-of-body experience. without any ego. I just tell them this is me. I'm here, and I
Yeah.
tell you how I did it. So one night I was still working full time for the Pirates during the day and at night. I had a job doing in-game stuff in the scoreboard room. I ran replay in this when we got their video board. So after a game one night, I had a buddy in Scranton who was doing the weather on a ABC affiliate up there. And I asked him if I didn't have a tape of any kind I had to give to Youngstown of me on air. I had nothing other than a quick thing, maybe a pregame stuff on KBL interview, but nothing as an anchor. So he was kind enough. He said, I'll tell you what, I will get a cameraman and somebody in our room, our control room, if you can get here before like 2 o'clock. So after a Pirate game, I drove all the way to Scranton, Pennsylvania. And sure enough, he and a cameraman were there and somebody from the control room. And I sat at the anchor desk and I had a script and they put it on the teleprompter. And I did this 5-minute sportscast. And that was it. I drove back to Pittsburgh, submitted that tape, and I got the weekend job at FMJ TV, Channel 27 in Youngstown, I believe it was. And it was great work. I did it Saturdays and Sundays. I talked to my boss at the Pirates. He said, as long as it doesn't affect what you do here, you can go ahead and do it. And I did. I would drive often, stay overnight at a Motel 6 because I did the 6 and 11 on Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes I would drive back to Pittsburgh after the 11 o'clock news on Saturdays and drive back on Sundays. At one point, the sports director took a week-long vacation and I had to do the sports for an entire week, which was challenging to say the least. But I did a good enough job where when the sports director around the time, the end of that summer, the fall of that year, maybe the winter, he was retiring and the news director called me into his office and he offered me the sports director's job, the full-time gig at WFMJ TV in Youngstown, Ohio, which, who knows what I could have parlayed that into. That could have been huge. But around that time is when the folks from Buffalo, New York, who were then the AAA affiliate of the Pirates, were making their way down to the Pirate front offices, kind of looking at the whole operation, trying to learn some things. And they were looking to start a little radio network up in Buffalo with the Bisons. And they went to my boss, who was the VP of broadcasting, and they said, do you know of anybody who might be able to help us put together a little network and maybe even do some part-time play-by-play work on our baseball games? And the guy said, I got just the guy for you. He works for me. And so that's when I had to make that decision. That was kind of a fork in the road, crossroads, 3 decisions I had to make. Do I stay at the Pirates with the big league team?
Yep.
Do I go to WFMJ TV full time and become a sports anchor, or do I leave and go up to Buffalo, New York? I didn't know where Buffalo, New York was, and I really didn't. I had to look at a map and find, wow, it was only like 4 hours from Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And right along the lake. So anyhow, I came to the decision if I wanted to be an announcer, I better get there.
So while doing the Buffalo Bison, you also you parlay that into working with the Bills for a little bit, right? Because you did a pregame and a postgame show, and that's a pretty exciting time to be in Buffalo.
Yeah, it was great. When I went there, I didn't really know I knew they wanted to help me they wanted me to help them put a network together, and that I was going to do some broadcast work. The middle 3 innings of the radio broadcast, the voice of the Bisons, Pete Weber, had been there a lot of years. And so he was going to do the first 3 and the last 3. And he was the sports director at the radio station as well. Pete was a mentor of mine. He is now a longtime voice of the Nashville Predators. He was there from the get-go in Nashville. He's tremendous at it. And but Pete was kind enough, dumb enough maybe, to throw me into everything. As the sports director of the station, I didn't even realize he was going to do this to me, but he said, hey, I'm taking off tomorrow. He did 6 to 7 weekdays sports talk. He goes, I'm taking off tomorrow. You do the show. What? So I did the sports talk 6 to 7. He anchored the sports in the mornings because I'm going to take next week off. You do the mornings. So from like 6 to 9, I was anchoring, and this was an all sports talk station at the time. They had just kind of somebody, the Riches, who owned the Buffalo baseball team, and Rich Stadium, named after this family of Rich Products creameries. Mindy Rich, the wife of the son of the owner of Rich Products, Bob Rich III, she owned the radio station. She was in charge. And so she kind of oversaw the operation, but I did the sports. Eventually I did some UB basketball play-by-play. Pete let me do that. I did a little college hockey. And though we didn't own the rights to the Bills to do play-by-play, we did have WGR have the rights to the talk shows of the general manager and the coach. So we had the Bill Polian show once a week. He was the general manager of the Bills. And we had the Marv Levy show once a week, where we would take calls. And again, Pete wouldn't do every night, but eventually I did like almost every Bill Polian show. Unbeknownst to me, I helped pitch the rights to get the Bills the following year. We got the rights after I did the pre and post game show with Pete Weber for the first year. And we did like a 3-hour, even though we didn't have the rights to the Bills, we did a 3-hour pre and post game show, and we were meticulous. We got tapes from the locker room, both locker room. We put it all together, and it fast paced, fast moving. And I guess I was good enough that, unbeknownst to me, when we got the rights to do the play-by-play, Bill Polian and Marv Levy had gone to the owner of the station, Mindy Rich, when they were looking for a color analyst. The play-by-play guy was going to stay, had been there since the AFL days, Van Miller, but they suggested to the owners of the station, Greg Brown should be your guy. I didn't even know that. So they offered me the job. Initially, I turned it down because I wanted to be a baseball guy. They were shocked.
I bet.
Program director calls me in and says, hey, we got an offer for you. You do Buffalo Bills color. And I went, what? Buffalo Bills color? I'm a baseball guy. I'm not a football guy. I was angry and kind of stormed out of the office. And I think he thought I was trying to get more money. And it turned out he did offer me more money. When I came back to him, I said, yeah, I'll take the job. And I did that. We had the Super Bowl years, 4 straight years. It was great.
Well, and are you still going between the Bills and the Bison because they're in different seasons? So you're still doing the baseball as well. You were just with the Bills for football season.
Yeah, I had actually become what Bill Polian and Marv Levy, I guess, had suggested to them was that we know that Greg's never done football. He's not a former NFL player. And back then, more teams did it. Heck, the Steelers did it forever. Myron Cope was the color announcer. He was known as the voice of the Steelers, but he was never played football in his life, but he was the color analyst. He was not the play-by-play guy. So they suggested that they put me on the beat because they said he could break stories for you. Mm-hmm. So let him go to when preseason started in Fredonia, New York, is where the Bills trained at a SUNY campus, a State University of New York campus, mm-hmm. In Fredonia. I was there all the time. And now, so that meant that they would bring in a third guy to do the Bisons. But if I wasn't on the road with the Bills, and a lot of times I do the reporting in Fredonia, and I don't want to make it look like I'm the hardest worker of all time. I need stretch, Carlo, because this is sports broadcasting. It's nothing compared to what real people do in this world. But I'd be hard pressed to ask anybody who would then drive at least 45 minutes, close to an hour, after putting in a full shift during the day of reporting during training camp. I would leave Fredonia, drive to Buffalo, get to the ballpark, and do a play-by-play of the baseball team. I did that for, probably my last 3 years.
Well, and that keeps you connected to the Pirates organization at that time, right? Because Buffalo was were they the AA affiliate?
AAA, yep.
AAA affiliate. And that, I think, is a good place we'll take a pause because that'll roll into the first year with the Pirates. I have to send it to our sponsor, Harry Chambers and Chambers General Store here in the town of Bethany. Actually, it's funny that I have to send it to him. We had talked earlier when we were trying to set up the interview about getting you down. You might have a schedule where you could come through Bethany. And I had told Harry, and I told him last week that we're going to end up doing it through Zoom. And he goes, Damn. All I wanted to do was ask him one question, and that question is on my list, so I will ask it when it gets there. But Harry Chambers and Chambers General Store, they have if they don't have it, you don't need it, and it's a fact. They have everything you can think of. You can get a breakfast sandwich, biscuits and gravy, soups, daily lunch specials. You can get a sandwich made for you right in front of you. And on top of that, if you need to, let's say you're remodeling your house and you need a saw or a hammer or anything, the deli's in front of you, and above the deli, there's all the saws and everything that you could get. So make sure if you're in Bethany, you stop into Chambers. You can also order their t-shirts through their Facebook page. It's Chambers General Store. They have a shirt that says Chambers General Store. If they don't have it, you don't need it. And they have it's the shroom capital of the world, because apparently Bethany has that moniker for them. But I am Carlo Guadagnino, and this is Dingo Talk. My guest, voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Greg Brown. And we will be right back.
While you're in Bethany, make sure you stop in the store for a daily lunch special, breakfast sandwiches all day. Try out the biscuits and gravy, guaranteed it'll fill you up. And also look for our new burnt orange Chambers, if we don't have it, you don't need it t-shirts, and our psychedelic green 3rd edition Bethany Mushroom Capital of the World t-shirts. Now back to you, Dingo.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest, voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Greg Brown. Greg, thank you again.
Carlos, my pleasure. As I said before, there's you have a lot of dreams in your life, a lot of goals, and I can check this off my list of being on Dingo Talk.
So, well, I appreciate that. I'm glad we can assist you in getting that off the list.
Bucket list. Yep, check it off.
So we left off. It's 1993. You're still up in Buffalo. How do you make your way back down the 3-hour drive back into the city of Pittsburgh and find yourself covering the Pirates every day?
So when I left the Pirates after the 1988 season, my first year in Buffalo was 1989. And after my first year, now remember, I was the assistant to the VP of broadcasting who recommended me to go to Buffalo in the first place. I knew him. And when I left, he told me, he goes, one of the guys on our crew we're probably not going to keep after next year, kind of hinting like, maybe you'll get this gig. So I went up there kind of high on my horse thinking, hey, give me a year in there and bang, I'll be right back as a broadcaster for the Pirates. Sure enough, they let someone go and the job opened up and I submitted my resume and tape and I didn't get the job. And I was devastated. I thought, what in the world do I have to do? I spent a whole year, 1 year in the minors, and now I don't, which is, a tongue in cheek because I know guys that are still in the minor leagues now when I was there in the minors. So 4 years after that, they let go another guy and I submitted my tape again. And this time, one of our trainers in Buffalo they talk a lot to the big league guys. So he conversed a lot with them and he became a real good friend of mine. And his name was not Carlo, but Carlos Ledesma. And good friend to this day, but as the football season went on from the fall into the winter, after the baseball season, they fired the guy and I submitted my tape and didn't hear much, but he would say stuff like, I hear that he was Latin. He is a Latin guy from Venezuela. I hear that they like you a lot. You on top of their list. And, he would keep saying that to me. I think you're going to get it. They tell me that you're, but it wasn't until I was up in the press room at Rich Stadium, which I reported to every day, basically the football stadium during the season. It was like a Wednesday afternoon and I'm writing some notes and I'm doing some tape and I'm getting ready to interview someone. And the PR guy from the Bills came in and said, you have a phone call from Mindy Rich, the woman I mentioned earlier, who was the owner of the radio station and the boss's boss. She was the boss. He said, Mindy Rich wants to talk to you. There's a phone right here. You can take the call. I'm like, Mindy Rich, why in the world is she calling me on a Wednesday afternoon? I would see Mindy on occasion in the office, and she's very nice. I mean, the whole story in itself, Bob and Mindy Rich, how great they are. They're two of my favorite people, and what they meant to me in a really dark time in my early Bills career. A lesson in how to motivate someone, I believe, what Bob and Mindy did. But I got on the phone, and my nickname was Stains, because I'm notorious for waving my arms around and spilling stuff all over the place. So I always once a week, it feels like I spill a cup of coffee, or I'm throwing my arms around. So my nickname was Stains. And I get on the phone. Hello, she goes, Stains, this is Mindy. Hey, Mindy, how are you? She goes, well, I have some good news for you, I think, but maybe not so good news for us. I got a phone call from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and they asked me for permission to speak to you. And I don't want to lose you, but I know where your heart is. And so you have my permission to call them back. So I thanked her, and I called them back, and they said, we want to talk to you about the opening. And that was I think maybe we did one more playoff game. Might have been it was certainly leading up to the Super Bowl, because I remember being in Atlanta in a rental car or in a cab on the phone the Super Bowl week with somebody up in Pittsburgh interviewing me about the job that I'd gotten the gig by that time. I'd been named the announcer, even though I still had a Super Bowl to do. So that's how it happened.
So, and you come into a time at the Pirates where, 92 season with Sid, where Sid Bream and the slide, and then 93 is kind of the beginning of what ends up being 20 seasons, because couldn't be 21, not after that number gets preserved. And then Bob Walk joins you, correct? That 94 season, when you come in, you have Bob coming off of being a player. Now is it Bob Prince that's still covering, or is Lanny Fratteri, has he already moved into, because I don't know when Bob Prince finished up his time. I know he was there for 28 years, and you're going into your 27th year. So who was the overlap with for you for that first year?
So my first year was 1989 with Buffalo. 5 years there, as you mentioned, Carlo, and then 90. And I'm glad you pointed out it was 21 years of not 21 years of losing, because that means I would have been the bad luck charm, because people wondered that after the losing started in 93. But I came with Bob Walk in 1994, as you correctly pointed out. Bob Prince was there for 28 years, and he was fired after the 75 season. Lanny came on in 76. So Lanny was still there. Lanny had I know Lanny didn't tell me this, but I know for a fact that Lanny, having known Lanny, worked with him when I was there in the front office. Lanny had always urged me to go to the minor leagues, learn, if you want to be a broadcaster, that's how you have to do it. When the job opened up the second time, I know Lanny lobbied for me to get the job. He carried a lot of weight, and felt that since he knew me, that I could, kind of be a good number two guy. And so that's how that all came about. But yeah, so Bob and I were rookies in 1994, and that year, the Pirates were bad in 93. They were even worse in 94. There was a baseball strike after the first week in August. So I was thrilled to be a major league broadcaster, but my timing wasn't necessarily perfect with that strike. And in fact, one of my first speaking engagements in public as a Pirate broadcaster was at the Butler Country Club for a luncheon. And I was the featured speaker. The Pirates wanted us to go out as often as we could and speak and keep baseball in the minds of fans. So I went out there, and Steve Blass was introducing me that day. And I'd known Steve for a lot of years, again, going back to my front office days, and became a good friend, one of my best friends to this day. But I point out this story to him and to others about being introduced as an announcer for the first time. And Steve got up there, and what I thought there were 1,000 people there. Maybe there were only a couple hundred, but I was nervous as all get out, speaking for the first time as a broadcaster. And I'm sitting there at the lunch, the dais, the head table, and Steve gets up there at the podium and he goes, "I'm going to introduce this featured speaker, a good friend of mine." When he left, he spent 10 years in the Pirate front office. He left to go up to Buffalo. The year after he left, the Pirates began a string of winning 3 consecutive National League Eastern Division titles. He went up to Buffalo and broadcast the Buffalo Bills and watched the Bills lose 4 straight Super Bowls. Now he's back. The Pirates are in last place. There's a baseball strike. Please welcome our good luck charm and featured speaker, Greg Brown. And you could hear a pin drop, like jaws drop, like what? And fast forward 20 straight years of losing. And I started to wonder, maybe I am the bad luck charm, but I always pointed out to others. And as you pointed out, the losing started the year before I got there.
Well, and you bring up Steve Blass. So it was not this past season, but the season before was the last year for him in the booth. What was it like covering the games with him day in and day out? And you said he's a dear friend, and I think that came across in that last broadcast that you two are together, how close of friends you guys are. But what was it like broadcasting with him every day?
Yeah, it was just a treat. It's still, and to this day, people ask me about the losing and how do you do it every year? Well, we had those 3 years of playoffs, of course, 13, 14, 15, and how do you do it? And for me, and you and I talked about this off mic, that it's a great gig. I mean, broadcasting is not, it truly is not brain surgery. There's nothing, it's just, it means a lot, I know, because growing up a fan of broadcasting and teams, I know how beloved the broadcasters are. So I kind of get that. And it's meaningful in that regard. And so many people come up to me and say, "I just want to let you know, I listen to all the games and you're my ties to the summer." And I get it. I also don't lose perspective in that it is the greatest job in the world, win or lose. Steve always used to say that. Baseball broadcasters, we have, when they're winning, it's a great job. When they're losing, it's still a great job. And so to this day, I tell people I get to go watch baseball, broadcast, which I grew up wanting to do, and I do it with my best friends, Steve, Bob, John Wayner. Now, bringing guys like the Fort McHenry. I love Kevin Young's a great friend of mine. Matt Capps, I love. All the Neil Walker now kind of joining the crew. These are guys that now I won't go out and far and say like they're my best friends, but they're good friends. John Wayner and Bob Walk, Steve Blass, are probably my best friends. And I would imagine as the years go on, I'm the last summer would go out with McHenry on the road after games, did it with the Capper here, did it with KY, Kevin Young. So it's such a treat that, and to the point about Steve, every day going to the ballpark, we started a tradition at Three River Stadium up at the, take the elevator to the 3rd level where the radio booth and the press rooms were. And we would hang out over the facade of looking down at people coming into the ballpark through gate A. And we would smoke a cigar almost every night. And we carried that tradition to PNC Park outside the stairwell, even though there's a no smoking sign right there. At one point, I took a picture of it with the 2 of us smoking and sent it to the VP of operations. I don't think he was thrilled. So we get our hands slapped on the cage, but we do it before the gates open, and no harm, no foul. But yeah, Steve, to this day, just a great friend. So
I have you brought up 2 very well. One, you brought up Fort McHenry, which means that I have to ask. There's a specific play in baseball when we were getting back to that. Clint Hurdle's now as the manager after going through a couple changes. There's a play at the plate after 19 innings on, I believe, July 26th of 2011. I remember watching the play. I was on the phone with my dad. Tag made. Hey, I'll call you back. They're going to switch innings. And the call is, he called him safe. What did you see on that play? And what is that play? What was that play for that group? Because that kind of derailed that season, but is almost a moniker for the 3 years where they do make the playoffs, is that, you know, they didn't help themselves, but the umpires didn't necessarily help themselves either.
Well, a lot went into it, Carlo. It was you mentioned 2011. That was the 19th inning. So you were telling your dad, hey, they're going to the 20th inning. Interestingly enough, the following year tells you about baseball, because we all felt like that was the end of the season. But, you know, you take a closer look and you realize baseball being 162 games, they always say momentum is only good in baseball, is only as good as your next day's starting pitcher. And the Pirates just didn't have enough that year. In 2012, they won a 19-inning game against the St. Louis Cardinals. Again, they collapsed in September, didn't go to the playoffs. They then went over the hump in 13. But that was a play that, you know, when you're with a team all year long and you get to know all these guys, you become friends with them, or you know, certainly friendly, and you root for them, you get to know their stories. You're part of the team. My goodness, the voices, the play-by-play guys, the color announcers, you are part of the team. You travel with them. You're there every day. So we have a vested interest in this. Heck, financially, you got to be kidding me. I mean, we all made more money in 13, 14, and 15. The more fans come, the more games you play, the more playoffs, the more money you make. I mean, you break it down to that, let alone what it means to you emotionally. So when that play happened, you know, you're invested in it as a broadcaster. It's a grind, and heck, if we're going to go 11, 12, 13, 14, my goodness, 15, 16, we got to win this thing, because it really hurts when you lose. It's a long night. It's going to be early wake up call the next day. You got to go right back at it on very little sleep. You better win this thing to make it worthwhile. And you appreciate what was going on. Daniel McCutcheon, the pitcher, had gone, I think, 5 innings of relief and kept telling Hurdle, I'm good to go. I'm good to go. So you appreciated what he was. He had everything he had left in him to throw strikes. And all of a sudden he was going to get out of it. Out of this situation. There was only one out. And the ground ball to third, go to the plate, and McHenry's just waiting to tag him. Foregone conclusion, he's out. What I know now, you know, I've heard that call replayed at times on other venues. Yep. I guess on the anniversary or whatnot. And there are plays over the years that I certainly wish I had done differently. And that's one of them. I wish I had said, because when you hear that call, it's you got to be kidding me, Jerry Meals. He was the home plate umpire, and I wish I had not singled him out. I don't think it's fair to him. I was angry at him as a fan at the time. I didn't think he did himself a favor when he came out the next day, a quote about having seen it, and he parsed his words. He was almost in lawyer's fashion, how he worded it. I thought he could have come clean with it better than he did. Still, to this day, I feel badly about it, because I know the grief he took to this day when he's at PNC Park and Tim DeBacco, the public address announcer, is giving the fans before the game the starting lineup, and the umpiring crew, no matter where he is, and the umpiring crew, blah, 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 blah. Jerry Meals at first base, boo. And
it comes straight down. They shower.
Yeah, and so, you know, I'm really partially to blame for that, maybe more than partially, and I feel badly about it. He's a Butler, Pennsylvania native. So I'm sure he's gotten all kinds of grief because it's an honest mistake. And the other thing about it, I'm a firm believer that play and the Armando Galarraga play in Detroit, where he had the near perfect game, Jim Joyce was the first base umpire, 2 outs, top of the 9th. He calls the guy safe, should have been out, perfect game would have happened, and he blew the call. Those 2 plays stand out as to why replay entered baseball. I guess it was going to happen anyway, but I think it sped up the process. That play with the Pirates and the Galarraga play, I think, did speed things up, and I'm anti-replay. Probably asked me the next day after the call with the Pirates and the Kevin. I probably said, heck yeah, get replay in here. looking back on it, that would have been a rush to judgment and a rash decision. And I think we'd all be better served if you eliminate replay from sports. So those two things stand out as, again, calling out Jerry Meals. I wish I hadn't done that. It was just a gut reaction, and just replay itself happens because of that, in a large part because of that play.
So from the Fort McHenry play, I'm kind of going to backtrack a little bit because there's another pretty infamous call from you play-wise. And it wasn't made by a baseball player as much as it was a manager. It might have been the greatest steal in Pirates history. Lloyd McClendon and first base. So take me through that play.
Yeah, it's another play that I hear replayed, and I only remember it really just because of hearing the replay. Lloyd was a fiery guy, and he goes out there, he marches out, and he argues, and he started to pull the base out of its moorings, and I didn't know what I thought he was going to. If you look at old baseball footage, baseball bloopers and follies, Lou Piniella was a fiery manager with the Reds and eventually the Cubs, the Tampa Bay Rays, Seattle Mariners. And there was one occasion where he actually pitches those bases are heavy. And he just kind of fired it. And so that was first thing that came to mind, is that Lloyd was so mad he's going to take it and throw it. I never have asked Lloyd. I have to do that. I just saw him at an event at a Josh Gibson Foundation a couple of months ago. He was honored in Pittsburgh, and chatted with him briefly. That's a fun question to ask him, as to when did he think. I would think it was spontaneous. He was either going to grab it and throw it, and then he figured, well, I better not do that. He tucks it under his arm and he marches off with it. And then when he got down the steps, and we could see the camera had a shot of the runway, he fires it down there. And talk about things to this day, it's brought up because at this very function, they did a live auction, and I was the live auctioneer. And the guy in charge, Sean Gibson, Josh Gibson's great grandson, it was the Gibson Foundation. It was that event. He was standing there next to me and telling me what Leach live auction was. And he whispered, he goes, Kevin McClatchy, the former owner of the Pirates, was also in the audience. He said, Kevin is going to auction off a first base and have Lloyd sign it. And I said, is it the first base? And he goes, no. He says, no, but the audience doesn't have to know that. So anyway, so Lloyd is still signing first bases.
and arguably could be the greatest steal in Pirates history when you.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. I don't know of anything else that stands out in terms. I mean, I know Omar Moreno was a great stolen base threat for a number of years in the 70s and 80s. And I think 5 straight years had 70 or more steals, but I don't know that any of them stand out as much as that one by Lloyd.
So the other Pirates thing, and it's something that my dad wanted me to make sure I asked you, is my first game was in 1997 with that, and I believe you dubbed that team the Freak Show because they weren't supposed to be good. And they made a run. I think they finished second in the division with the likes of Francisco Cordova and I believe a rookie Jose Guillen, Al Martin, Kevin Pollock,
Polkovich.
Yeah. That's what it was.
Probably was. Yeah, go ahead.
I believe Kevin Young's on that team. Jason Kendall's on that team. I mean, those are a lot of young guys that end up taking us through the 90s and the early 2000s. What was the 97? What was special about that 97 team?
To your point, it was a team that wasn't expected to do anything and just kind of out of nowhere started to win. Now they benefited by the fact that it was a bad division that year. The Houston Astros, then in the National League, ended up winning, as you mentioned. The Pirates weren't eliminated until the very last weekend of the year when they went down to Houston for the last 3 games. But they were helped out because everybody hovered around 500 that whole year. But in this case, the Pirates weren't even expected to be at 500. But and that's how the Freak Show thing came to be, because so many things happened during the course of that season that you mentioned Polkovich. Polkovich came in after Kevin Elster was signed as a free agent. He had been a New York Mets star, shortstop, and the Pirates signed him as a free agent, maybe even a minor league free agent. But he was the starting shortstop, and a couple weeks into the season, he was like the team leader. I remember on the team bus. I'll never forget on the team bus. Back then, we were before Ed Sprague came along. Ed Sprague's on my most wanted list of disdain former Pirates. People ask me my favorite Pirates. He's one of my least favorite Pirates. Ed Sprague, who was a veteran, later on kicked us off the player bus. Guys like former Pirate players, Bob Walk and Steve Blass, and I were on that bus. And Elster would go on the back of the bus, last row, and he'd have the old boom boxes, and he would play all these Hootie and the Blowfish songs. Every bus ride. Only Want to Be With You. I mean, that just is entrenched in all of our memories. But he was the team leader. He got hurt, and then Polkovich, this no-name guy, comes in and he fills in. And you mentioned Jose Guillen in right field, a rookie, and they just seem to have like these career. Kevin Young had a great year. Cordova, these guys, kind of no-name pitching staff, and it just seemed to work. And that freak show happened in Montreal. I think maybe June, late June, maybe early July that year when I said that. We were doing a TV game, Bob Walk and I, and Pirates were behind late, and I had been talking about all the crazy things that had been happening, and somehow Bob and I got into a debate. Bob always, pokes the bear with me. Something about how 3-run homers are great. Kevin Young must have been on deck, and whoever was at the plate. And I said, yeah, but grand slams don't happen as much. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, those are kind of freaky things. So then Kevin Young comes to the plate. He goes, well, hey, here we go, right? I mean, you said grand slam could happen here. And then the grand slam happened, and I said the freak show. And thanks to my buddy Keith Olbermann and then Dan Patrick, they were anchoring ESPN that night, the Sports Center. I got home very late, was unpacking in my room, and I had the TV on. It's probably 2 a.m, and they started. You can imagine my surprise, Carlo, when I'm just kind of doing stuff, unpacking, and tired, and all of a sudden, as I'm unpacking, Sports Center comes on with that call. Kevin Young, they lead with that, and then they go into da-da-da, and Olbermann says, Dan Patrick, welcome to the freak show edition of Sports Center. And all 60 minutes, both Olbermann and Patrick teased me. They mentioned my name at the beginning, but, kind of were goofing on that freak show thing. And that kind of catapulted that into, and then they started playing the song Freak Out by Le Chic, a late disco song, the late 70s. When the Pirates did something crazy at Three River Stadium, they did that. And then they started handing out T-shirts. Some of the players started wearing freak show T-shirts, and fans got on board with it. It was totally spur of the moment, and it just happened.
Now, is that the normal? That's the spur of the moment type, because you have a lot of calls. I mean, you have clear the deck, cannonball is coming. The Colin Moran calls and the other calls that you've made that are kind of, I don't want to call them catchphrases, because that's not what they are. They're spur of the moment, and then they stick, right? Like the first time you use something, that's how you saw it. That's the call you made. And then for some of them, they've stuck, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of both. Some are like that. Some are, I get from fans. Some are very much spur of the moment, off the cuff. Some are, the home run call. I do some different home run calls over the years, but a real good friend of mine to this day, but my barber, he actually owns now a bar in McKees Rocks. He's a big Bucko fan. And one night he called me, he was having a party at his house, and I was on the West Coast, had to be probably 3 a.m. in Pittsburgh. By the time I got to the hotel, and midnight in San Diego, or wherever it was, and he's on the phone with me. He's very well into the program. He could still basically give me a sentence or two, but he was definitely feeling it. I could tell. yeah, I got the call for you. I got the home run call. It's my dad, my uncle. We've been sitting around here talking, and we came up with this. He went through the whole thing about how they were sitting around, and Greg needs a call, and let's do something involving it's piratey, something along the river, maritime, whatever. And how about Greg likes the movie Caddyshack, quotes it all the time. My buddy Aaron and I do. And when Bill Murray's character with Chevy Chase is practicing at night. I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, but
Yes.
he goes into his little apartment, and he goes, "Hey, is that your ball I saw traveling through here, Ty?" And then he hands over the substance, cannonball coming. So anyhow, that works too, because it's kind of piratey. But then Aaron said that we need a lead in. It can't just be cannon. How about clear that cannonball? Anyway, so I told him, I said, all right, got him off the phone. I said, I'll give it a shot. And I did it a couple times. And I don't know if it would stick. Pirates weren't very good at that time. And I don't know that much sticks, because you've got hardcore fans, but not a huge maybe fan base until they start to win. But about that time, I was down in the dugout watching pitchers take batting practice. They didn't know I was there. I was kind of in the runway watching it. They had no idea I was there. But at one point, I think AJ Burnett, they're trying to hit home runs, and I heard AJ Burnett yell, "Clear the deck, cannonball coming." I thought, wow, that gives it some legitimacy right there. So I stuck with it. And when the team started to win, then everybody, same thing with Raise the Jolly Roger. I was doing that for years before they were winning, and nobody paid attention. And then when 12, 13, 14, 15 comes around, then it became a thing. And which is great. That's what happens when you win. Everything's better.
Well, so, and you bring up the 12, 13, because 12 is really that where you can see that the team is coming together. 13, obviously, they break through. It's not the 21st season of losing seasons. A lot of streaks get snapped. There's a pretty big important call there where Russell Martin gets a ball from Polanco, I believe, at home plate against the Cubs. And that's an important call for Pirates history. But then there's a game, and that game takes place on the shores of the Alleghenies at PNC Park. There's the stadium's packed. It's a blackout, and Cueto drops the ball. What, from being there, being in the moment, what was the atmosphere like leading up to the ball drop? And I know that as a Pirates fan, I was screaming at the TV, and I believe that I helped make Cueto drop that ball. Do I believe that? As a Pirates fan, yes. As a realist, maybe not. But so what was the feeling for you in that moment?
Yeah, I'll go down in Pirates lore forever. I know, Pirates legend, the Cueto game. That Cub game was memorable for me. One of the most memorable, because Pirates had to win. I think the Cardinals had to lose to clinch a playoff spot. And that play, the Pirates had a 1-run lead, bottom of the ninth. All of a sudden, one thing, Jason Grilli, big time closer. All of a sudden, one thing leads to another. They got a runner at second base, and there's a base hit to right field. And I think Marlon Byrd actually was right field. I think Byrd was out in right and bobbled it. And McCutchen backed him up and picked the ball up. And even though it was a slow-footed runner, the third base coach, David Bell, by the way, is now the manager of the Reds, waves him home. And the throw from McCutchen is well off the mark. And I've talked to Justin Morneau, who's the first baseman for the Pirates. I talked to him last year off the air. Oh, it was during COVID, because we were playing the Twins, and we got on a kind of a Zoom call with those guys, the other announcers, to get a little rundown. And I said, hey, before we start, I said, Justin, I haven't really talked to you since you left. I said, but you do not get enough credit for that play. It was almost Derek Jeter-like. Jeter gets credit for that throw against Oakland, where he intercepts it between first and home. And Morneau did the same thing between the pitcher's mound and first base. Now, he's a first baseman, but he was right there at the right time. Threw a strike to Russell Martin, applies the tag. and Martin raises his arms, and here's Grilly hugging him. It was really iconic, I think, photo that kind of broke the Pirates out of that. Then we waited. I was on the TV side with John Wayner at Wrigley Field. They kept us on the air because if the Cardinals ended up losing, I think maybe Robbie was going to do some interviews in the clubhouse with the champagne and all. So we were kind of anchoring, and I had brought cigars to the booth, and I said to Wayner during a commercial break, they're going to come right back to us. And Wayner, we're lighting this. I don't care if we get in trouble or not. So we lit the cigars. Heck with it, man. We found out the Cardinals had lost. The Pirates had clinched. Keith Moreland was the color announcer at the time for the Cubs in the radio booth, which was right next to our TV booth, and only plexiglass separates each booth at Wrigley. And so they can see what we're doing. And he sees us, and he kind of gives us a thumbs up. He pulls out, I can say this now, statute of limitations. I can't get in trouble, but he pulls out a little velvet case of Crown Royal, and he hands it to me, and thumbs up. And so I could say whether I won't say whether we did or did do this. Perhaps somebody went and got us some Diet Coke, and perhaps somebody poured it in. I don't know the answer to that, but we were on the air for another probably close to an hour. And we very much enjoyed that. We absolutely relished the opportunity to be there and soak that all in. Then that wild card game, I remember I went to the ballpark very early because I've been a long time preacher on my soapbox, on and off the air, to friends and family and fans alike, that when I got to Pittsburgh, when I became a Pirate broadcaster, don't tell me this is a hockey town. Don't tell me it's a football town. It is neither. It's all of the above, and it's a baseball town. It's not solely that. It's a winner's town.
Yeah.
Having just been up in Buffalo, it's blasphemy to hear the Steeler fans, me to say this. Sorry, but Buffalo's as good a football town as Pittsburgh is. What? How can you say that? Because I was there. I was there when we arrived home at the airport in Buffalo in the middle of a snowstorm. And we had to take a little path out of the aviation area off the main airport. And we flew in, and there had to be 5 or 6 inches on the ground. We get in our cars, and I'm trying to drive through, not only worried about the snow, but this sea of humanity of Bills fans who would block and they even knew me, like Greg Brown, like I'm an announcer. And they're like knocking on the hood, and you had to wait. I mean, it's insane how the people are. But that happens in every town around the country when you have a winner. And so I would say this, I said, the only thing missing for the Pirates right now is a baseball park. So we played in a football stadium for 30 years, whatever it was, 1970. Yeah, 30 years. Mm-hmm. Now, it was great when they had some winning teams, and they had some good attendance marks when they won, but nothing like if you had the combination of a ballpark and a winner. Then you've got the Wrigley Field of the East, in my opinion. And I kept saying that through all the years of losing at PNC Park. We had the ballpark, but we didn't have the team. Mm-hmm. And it all came to fruition in 13. And so I decided that day of that wild card game to go way early. I think it was a 4:30, 5 o'clock game. I got there 2 or 3 hours before even the gates opened. But I walked around the outer concourse, upper level at PNC Park, and I looked down at the corners of General Robinson and Federal Street. And this just sea of humanity of just black everywhere, and people chanting and partying and huge Jolly Roger flags and let's go Bucks chants. And it was something to behold. And then when the gates finally did open, and the rush of people, it's like somebody threw honey on an anthill. I mean, all of a sudden it's filled up 2 hours before game time. And then when Cueto dropped the ball, the Martin home run, and Steve Blass and I argue about this. Steve hates it when people say that, the fans didn't force Cueto to drop that ball. That's ridiculous. Maybe not. I have a feeling that the fans chanting didn't force him to drop the ball. No. But, however, what nobody talks about, what I do believe in my heart of hearts absolutely happened, was in Cueto's mind. Of course, they got louder and louder as he goes to pick up the ball. Now they're really on him. So in order to quiet the crowd as quickly as possible, the best thing he could do would be to sneak a fastball past Russell Martin, get it out of the way. That's what it forced him to do. And that was the mistake that he made, that pitch. And Martin jumped all over it for the home run. And of course, bedlam after that.
Well, and then the next 2 years, outside of the first wild card game where they win, they go to game 5 with St. Louis, losing in St. Louis. But then the next 2 years, the teams that beat the Pirates end up winning the World Series. You run into Jake Arrieta and the Cubs, and you run into Madison Bumgarner, who ends up having probably one of the best playoff postseasons as a whole, the year that the Giants win. And that 15 season, there was so much like, yeah, we're here again, here we go. And one of those years, the Pirates are the second or third best team in the league. I mean, there was them, the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Cubs, and the Cardinals get in, and the Cubs and the Pirates are the second and third best team in baseball, and they got to play for a chance to go play against the Cardinals, I think. So once you get out of those 3 years, then the 16th season, I think, a little bit disappointing, just in the sense with some of the front office moves and the things that the common fan doesn't really know about. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. You can't keep it. It's very hard to keep a team together. It is very hard. No matter what sport you're talking about, it's very hard to keep a team together. So, Clint Hurdle runs his course. We now are at Derek Shelton. Then you throw the COVID into there. And now, last season, what was the first year without Steve Blass for you? What was the feelings? Because again, this is a team, last year's Pirates, that they weren't really, we knew kind of what we were. We were a young team. Let's see who we have. Let's get some guys some playing. Key Brian Hayes, if he doesn't get hurt, who knows what would have happened in that stretch. What was last season like in comparison to other seasons? Because I mean, the COVID year is a weird year where you guys are in Pittsburgh broadcasting the games, right? You're not traveling. You're sitting in a studio watching it as we are and covering it. But what was last? Was there a change last season? Was it what were the differences between the COVID year and the year following? I don't know if we can say following COVID, the year outside of the original COVID year, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I completely cross out 2020 in baseball. I was glad to get back, but that was not a baseball season. And I say, with all due respect to the Dodgers and Rays who went to the World Series, that didn't count. In fact, I think the Dodgers still have to earn a World Series in my mind. 60 games in baseball is insane. It's like playing 4 games of an NFL season. It's just ridiculous. But I wanted to get back to playing. I didn't care how. In fact, I was all in on everything. The replay, runner at second base, extra innings, DH, pitcher limit. I don't care. Let's play ball somehow, some way. Even if I had to report from a studio, get back on the field. So, but that having been said, I totally, and I tell Derek Shelton this all the time. You've had one season as a manager in the big leagues, not 2020. 2021 was your first year. And it was way better because most of the time, at least and at my behest, I was urging the team to let us at least travel the radio announcers back in I said, let me drive to any drivable place in the COVID year. Let me drive to Cleveland. Finally, they relented in last year in 2021. I went and drove on my own to Cincinnati, did that game in the booth by myself. I was on an iPad with Bob Walk. He did the color. He stayed in the studio. I did the same thing in Detroit, the next road trip. And to show them that, we can do this, that you can't let this thing beat you. It drives me crazy that people just, okay, I get 2020, but we're done. Let's go. Let's live. And let's show people, let's show fans, let's show everyone we can continue. We don't have to stay in our cocoons. We can get out there and we can get this done. So did that. And finally, then at the All-Star break, we traveled the radio teams. Unfortunately, we are, AT&T does their own thing. They're owned by Time Warner, and it's a big company, and they have different set of rules. I'm pushing that as well. Finally, last year we did do the last road series in Cincinnati on TV. Traveled just the announcers. We did it. Our producer and director were remotely doing it from the control room in Pittsburgh, but at least we got out there. And again, we showed people. So I've been promised that we're going to travel again this coming season on TV, which means it will be full blast. And my fingers are crossed that is the case, that nobody will go back on their word and that we'll do it. And in terms of that, so it was better. It was way better to have fans. Oh my gosh, not having fans in the ballpark is brutal. It's just so good and it really made us appreciate it to have fans back. And I didn't care if it was, 5,000 or 20,000. It didn't matter to me. They were louder, I think, than ever before. And I think they enjoyed it. There were some entertaining games. They lost 100 games last season, but for my money, it was more entertaining for me watching all those games than the last couple years. Not that it's his fault, but the last couple of years of Clint Hurdle in 2018 and 19. I had more fun doing last year than I did those 2 years pre-COVID. And even though they lost 100, I thought they were fun to watch. There were some crazy things, some mind-numbing, dumb things that were done on the field by some Pirate players, including missing first base on a home run, including getting caught between first and home.
I was wondering if that one was going to come up.
Yeah, never been seen before. A run scoring on the play, crazy. So, but still, all in all, it was fun to see some of the young guys finally start to break through. We talk about 2012 season when you could see the players start to emerge. McCutchen coming into his own shortly after the arrival of Neil Walker and Pedro Alvarez and some of the pitchers. And I equate the 2020 season maybe to about the 2011, maybe around that time. You started to see Rodolfo Castro, O'Neill Cruz, some of the players they got in the trades, the pitchers that came up. So I think that you could start to see that, and more as the seasons go on this year and next, it'll be even closer to that playoff contending team.
So you mentioned some of the rule changes that happened during that COVID year. There's one specific one I want to ask you about, and it's the universal DH. This will be probably the last question. It won't be the last question, but this is the last baseball question. What is your opinion as a guy that's now, 27, you're going into your 27th season with covering baseball at the major league level? What do you feel about the universal DH, if you can talk about it? Because I know that with all the other things that swirl around, there are rules in which, but what is your feelings on the universal DH?
Yeah, and I honestly, gosh, don't get caught up in it, but I think only because I did a thing last week that Lanny Fratteri was involved in. Lanny was actually in the audience. Somebody asked him a question about Hall of Fame, and he said to me, and I didn't thought, he says, "Greg, you're going to be passing me in a couple of years." So I think 29 years coming up this year for me, which is mind-boggling. And most of those years, Carlo, many of those years, I know I've been on the bandwagon with Bob Walk, kind of mocking the designated hitter, almost tongue in cheek, but not really, because Bob feels the way I have for years. I have not been a fan of the American League, and Bob, having played in the National League all those years, actually had a dislike for the American League. Back then, before Interleague, when you would play in the All-Star game, there's a reason why Pete Rose bowled over Ray Fosse, the American League catcher for Oakland. Rose playing for the Reds. They wanted to win so badly, he basically destroyed Fosse. Ball dropped. They National League wins the game. Might have destroyed Fosse's career. He was never the same after that. They dislike each other. They did not. The leagues disliked each other. When they met in the World Series, they had never played against each other before. American League versus National League. American League is not as good a game, in my opinion. And it would take a 2-hour show on DingoTalk to go through all the reasons why the National League is different and better than the American League. American League fans like the designated hitter. I'm not so sure of that. I think what would have been really cool had interleague play, when the interleague play entered into the equation, what I think they should have done in hindsight, have the DH in National League ballparks, in other words, so when the Pirates hosted an American League team, have the DH then, vice versa, when the Pirates or National League team visited Cleveland, have the pitchers bat, then the two fan bases would have seen what it was like in person. And then I think maybe a different outcome, because I was convinced that had people really seen it, watched it, you may be right. I've had fans angrily email me or talk to me and say, "Oh, you've been against the DH. What are you going to do now when it comes to the National League? Well, are you going to like it then?" I said, "Ho. Wait a second. If indeed it happens, I'll meet that beast at that time. And of course, I'll have to, if indeed, it's a big if, because to this day, I'm not convinced. I'll wait till it actually is put into play. I'll deal with it then. But until then, I will not. And what bothers me a lot, Carlo, is that people are, and baseball in a lot of ways mirrors society. It has for a long, long time. You look at how great this sport is. In a lot of ways, it's because it mirrors society or is out in front in society. Jackie Robinson being one. What that led to is beyond the baseball field. That broke a glass ceiling years ago. For not just baseball and sports, but in society. And that, so again, I really believe that. And what bothers me a lot, and it's happened in the last few years, and sometimes I'll go on the air and say, "Oh, there you are, you old man, get off my lawn." And it's not that. That's such an easy throwback to me. It's that people give up the fight. Like, what happened to us fighting for what you truly believe in? All of a sudden has become something that you mock, which I don't get. I think you should be applauded. And I think more people should I for years said, like, hey, National League fans, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, St. Louis, the old teams that have been here forever, the Dodgers, who were the Brooklyn Dodgers, the San Francisco Giants were the New York Giants. The Pirates are a team that have been around for 135 years. Let's fight for it. Don't just give in. That drives me nuts beyond the baseball field. I love debating with people who don't even believe what I believe politically, as long as you keep it civil. And some of my best friends are people I argue with screaming at the top of my lungs. My very best friend down in Houston thinks polar opposite of what I do when it comes to politics, but we're still best of friends. But I love the fact that he fights truly for what he believes, and he respects the fact I fight truly for what I believe. And I know it's a little strong when you ask about the designated hitter. It's just baseball, but it bothers me that people just are willing to just give up the fight. It's going to happen. I won't believe it till it does.
Well, and lastly, I guess the way I would like to wrap this up is, so you touched on a lot of things in the first part, where you were talking about the fact that you'd be at Buffalo Bills training camp, get in a car, drive an hour back, do a show, or do the Bison games. You would do the Pittsburgh front office stuff, drive to Youngstown, do the sports stuff. What would for a college student, for a high school student, maybe somebody in neither of those categories, but somebody that's just interested in getting into broadcasting, what advice, as someone who has, started at the bottom of broadcasting and kind of just level by level inched your way up?
Well, yeah, talked to a lot of individual over the winter. I'll have a cup of coffee with guys, gals that want to get involved in sports. They say on an email, I would do anything to do what you're doing. And then, frankly, to be quite honest with you, too often for my liking, I'll sit across a table from this person and I'm wondering, like, do you care about anything? Like you said, you'd do anything to be a broadcaster. I don't believe you'd do anything for like it goes back to my point about fighting for things. I want to reach across the table, Carlo, and shake them physically, like, wake up, live. Like you are you have. So I'm married, have a kid, don't regret that. That's great. My son's off to college and all that. And I'm pretty much entrenched. It'd be very difficult. It could happen. Very difficult though for the stars to align and you pack up and move to another city, another location. But for 99% of high school and college students, the world is your oyster. You can go anywhere, do anything that you want to do. But first you have to, so I say, find your passion and really believe in it. Don't tell me you want to be a broadcaster and then I find out, now you really don't. It's like when you get your first car and you have your mindset about how much I can afford. So I'm going to go into the sales rep and go to the car dealer and I'm going to look over and the good salesperson that he or she is shows you all, and you look at the car and you see all the cool stuff inside and man, oh, I didn't know they had that. So you had your mindset on this monthly payment, but all of a sudden it becomes that much, which is way more than you had your mindset most times. Mm-hmm. But you have your mindset on that car and then you see that car on the road all the time. You had never noticed this particular car, this brand, this make before, but now you don't miss it. It's right there. And you get that car. But the point is, nothing is going to stop you from getting that car. It's not going to, you'll take another job. I love that car. I want to get it. I'll do whatever it takes. It could be the newest phone, and whatever it is, nothing's going to stop you. So the same has to hold true if you want to be whatever it is in life. But in particular, sports broadcasting, you have to be willing to go anywhere, work for practically nothing. I tell people, I can proudly say, old time Pirate fans used to think that I was the descendant of Joe L. Brown, a longtime general manager, because my name was Brown. Some thought that, oh, that's got to be Joe Brown's nephew, son, grandson, whatever. No, it had nothing to do with it. I did it all on my own. At one time, I could tell people I cleaned jock straps, I cleaned toilets, but I was willing to do that. I was willing to do whatever. And so you have to you can't be afraid of work. Don't let anybody tell you, if you have that dream, don't let anybody tell you can't do it. Because I had a lot of people tell me that's ridiculous when I got the job initially from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh with the Pirates. A lot of people, my family, don't be ridiculous. I got the job as the backup team mascot. That's how I got the job initially. But don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I tell people I've got a modicum of talent. I've got that much talent. I've got that much passion and enthusiasm. So you do have to have some talent. I know I do have some. You can't just some people don't have it, and that's okay. They do other things. Mm-hmm. I have a nephew that wanted to go into broadcasting and he just doesn't have it. You have to have some of that, but he's a really good writer. Yeah. And could be a great sports writer. Like it can lead to things. So it's a pretty simple equation. Have a little bit of talent. Don't have to have a lot. You can make yourself that. Exactly. And don't be afraid of work. Don't tell anybody you can't do what you want to do.
Well, and I want to correct myself. So it's 20. Congratulations on going into the 29th season.
That's okay. I didn't want to say, but I'm not looking. Thank you. I'm not looking to break records. I'm really not.
But that puts you in a pretty exclusive category. I mean, you have Bob Prince at 28 years. You're at 29, and Lanny at 33. So you made the comment earlier in the show about how Lanny said you're coming up on. I didn't realize that as close as you were, but congratulations, and I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing the show and for calling the Buccos for all these years, because You know, I was born in 91. So when you got to Pittsburgh was right about the time where I could start listening to the radio. So
Boy, I don't like that though, because about the time you really started listening is about the time I came on board and we started losing. You'll have to introduce me at the next function for Steve Lash. You can fill in for him, Carlo.
I'll do my best.
Thanks a lot, Carlo. Seriously, thank you. You're unbelievably prepared, and that makes it very easy on the subject.
Well, thank you. I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. Greg Brown, the voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We'll be back next Thursday at 10 a.m. on YouTube. You can also catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, which just type in Dingo Talk. Twitter is Dingo Talk. Instagram is Dingo_Talk because somebody already had Dingo Talk as their tag mark. You can find us anywhere on social media. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And one more time, thank you very much, Greg, and best of luck this season.
Thank you, Dingo. We're going to raise the Jolly Roger a lot, I think, this year.
I agree.
Thanks a lot, Carlo. Go
Thank
Dingo
you.
Talk.
Know by now. You wanna know